The problem with meeting a leprechaun is that you will spend the rest of your life telling the story of the leprechaun. The blessing of meeting a leprechaun is that now you have a profound story to tell, as well as all of the other blessings that come with meeting the leprechaun. I am here to testify to not only having met a leprechaun, but to have significant information from my studies regarding the true nature of a leprechaun. See, the leprechaun is a character in Celtic folklore, but indeed also in ancient Irish reality. The ancient bleeds into the not-so-ancient, and bleeds once more into the space between your mother's thighs. And thenceforth, the leprechaun is born again. But you don't have to understand, just look into what it means to be born again. I am only here to tell you what it means to be a leprechaun. See, there are not two types of leprechauns. There is no good leprechaun and no bad leprechaun. There's only one leprechaun. And he is not the leprechaun of Hollywood movies or the imaginations of non-Irish people and non-leprechauns. They mixed their devil with our leprechaun, and I am here to rectify that. Our leprechaun was not a stealer of children or a murderous freak out to suck blood from innocent people. That was the people who made the movies. They could never, ever understand the spirit of the leprechaun, but as long as we have that misunderstanding cleared up, we can proceed. Come in behind this door here. Please come into my living room, sit by my fire while I tell you the story of the leprechaun. Let's stay up all night long, and I will tell you the story of the leprechaun and other stories that I know of the banshee, several fairies, about family, friendship, love, life, death, history, loss, and survival. For this is a leprechaun garden, for it is also the Vejigante garden, the Anansi the spider garden, the Coyote garden, the La Llorona garden. It is the garden of wandering tricksters, and I dwell in this place. I entered it the only way one can, through the portal of one's own cultural heritage. And for me, the spiritual folkloric creature that I personally know in a deep manner is the leprechaun. So here is where it starts. Many wonder if there is just one leprechaun or many leprechauns, but no two people have ever actually seen the leprechaun at the same time. None can remember speaking at the same time in the presence of the leprechaun, even if they seem to remember being there. But some wondered if the leprechaun ever stopped talking in their presence anyway. See, it was difficult to get a word in edgewise in front of the leprechaun. It's not wrong to tell the truth. See, the leprechaun does have the gift of gab and the gift of true wit, as well as the inability to stop talking and joking without interruption, which I do not recommend. As legend has it, the leprechaun will offer you a riddle. If you get it right, you will get some of the pot of gold. And friends, it is a never-ending pot and a never-ending relationship of luck when you have answered correctly the riddle and received access to the pot of gold. If you get the riddle wrong, well shit, you have to give up your gold and give it to the leprechaun. How the fuck do you think he got that pot of gold in the first place? It wasn't an act of evil or malice. It's just that we Irish believe that the fool must pay, and that you shall, unless you have what it takes to answer the riddle, which you will be rewarded. Because the leprechaun is just as much about fools paying as he is about prosperity and sharing, socializing, joking, and of course luck. But remember, Irish luck is a reminder of the delusion of faith. Stay humble. We are all burrowing underground. And now you wonder the nature of the riddle. And because you wonder the nature of the riddle, I am now secure that you to some degree believe in the leprechaun. You will never have a chance of answering correctly the riddle, because the leprechaun is of course wiser than we are. The leprechaun is very much the jolly trickster, and the trickster never fails. But the leprechaun does give blessings to those who know and recognize him if, and only if, they show loyalty, but more so if they answer correctly the riddle, and I did not ever say that it was easy. Believers in the leprechaun, sit a while and ponder what we know about the leprechaun from the records of Yeats and other early Irish folklorists. We know that the leprechaun may be found hiding among the foxglove or wandering amidst the clover, both useful herbs in the pre-colonial Irish herbarium. Foxglove, a plant used for many ailments, including strengthening the heart. And clover, a cleansing plant for the whole system. So was the leprechaun a medicine man? In Irish folklore, he certainly stood a creature of luck and fortune among the medicines. And at all times, when the leprechaun is evoked, his position to nature is mentioned. He may be along the banks of a river, he may be found at the end of a rainbow, and there he holds his pot of gold, symbolic, friends, the fortune found when we convene with nature. And the message being that fortune itself is found in nature, where he resides. I walked along the cliffs of Dingle Bay as a girl when my mother took me to Ireland. I walked alone with a large band of hippies who sang and marched through the grassy cliffs along the shores in the ancient mist. One tall man with a little pipe stopped me for just a moment and said, "We are walking to find our mantras. Come with us. Listen for your mantra as you walk in these hills. Listen for your mantra as we walk in these hills." But what is it to take the leprechaun out of the sacred space of nature and the Irish mist? What about the leprechauns who are born each day in South Buffalo, in South Boston? What about the leprechauns born into the hardness of the city? What would it be like to be a real leprechaun who was born in Detroit? Could you imagine how he might suffer, a man made for telling riddles in the morning dew, for hiding near rainbows, for wandering in clover, for telling stories amidst the foxglove? A man made for staying long and long near the banks of rivers, soaking up the medicines of the stones and the grasses and the muds, making them into riddles and poems and songs of hope for the lonely travelers he met along the countryside? What would you do if you were a leprechaun born far away with no one to teach you about being a leprechaun, with none of the clover, none of the rainbows, but all of the gifts and the magic of the best of the leprechauns? What if you had none of the medicines of the Irish countryside, but all of the need for medicine that a leprechaun could need, which is a whole lot of medicine? Well, you would do what you had to do out of a sense of duty to do the job of the leprechaun, because another belief among the Irish is to live is to serve. Instead of a cozy home in the hollowed out inside of a great tree you'd find a squat to live in, instead of wandering along the banks of rivers looking for a passerby to riddle and heal, you would have to binge watch Naked and Afraid until some lonely travelers wandered in looking for direction. Instead of indulging in healing medicines of the Irish countryside, you would have to develop your position as an underground importer of a great variety of narcotics, a dangerous pharmacopoeia very much known by the leprechaun that I knew. Instead of gaining a pot of gold through the magic of your charm and wit, you'd be cuffed and dragged away for telling lies and stealing. Instead of living a life of solitude in nature, you'd be confined to a cell, and even when freed from incarceration, you would always be confined to the fact that you were a leprechaun in a world that could not see you. Within the context of savage, hyper-techno-capitalism, your storytelling would be seen as disruptive. In the work environment, you'd be fired and sent away from every place you'd ever tried to enter in the fullness of your true self, which would drive you to excel in the underground economy, running the streets between guitar strums. Only there would you find people who understood concepts bred into you, loyalty and honor among thieves. They would label you a con artist when you were only telling riddles and never finding that pot of gold. Now you are getting the picture. We are here to remember a real leprechaun, and as the niece of a true leprechaun, I'm here to give you one last chance at that pot of gold, one last chance at the promise. Dear traveler, who was your leprechaun? Now maybe you see you met one too one day. The leprechaun, through your experience with him, gave you or made evident a choice or set of choices that you have to make. At some point, you may have revealed to the leprechaun the nature of the choices you know you need to make. You may have shared your vision of the future with the leprechaun. You may have doubted or probed at your talents with the leprechaun. The leprechaun may have told you many stories that involved somehow lessons in spirituality, truth, nature. The leprechaun may have both betrayed you and saved you. The leprechaun may have rewarded you and stripped you of your title. The leprechaun may have stood in the way of your talent and ability until the right moment when it could thrive. The leprechaun may have made you laugh until you cried. The leprechaun may have made you cry until you could only laugh. And what did you do for the leprechaun? You did everything to prevent the leprechaun from being a real leprechaun. You refused to admit that you were talking to a leprechaun. You did not treat him with the grace deserving of a leprechaun, but don't worry, no one ever does. For some of you, the riddle is a matter of life or death. For some of you, it is about acceptance. For some of you, it is about transcendence. For some of you, it is about recognizing your magic. The question is, how will you answer the riddle of the leprechaun? For that conversation that you had with the leprechaun, that promise that you made after hearing from the leprechaun, that question that you received from the leprechaun, will you answer it as you must? Will you surrender your addictions? Will you live for your own truth? Will you take care of your responsibilities? Will you love your brothers and sisters? Will you forgive your parents and honor your ancestors? Will you write that story that hums inside you? When you write it, will you sing it out loud? Will you treat every single person you meet with the grace and cheer and generosity of the leprechaun? Will you lay out your heart for your friends? Will you remember that the hand that feeds never starves?